Welcome to the Living After Faith podcast, here to help you recover from the damage of religion and move forward with your life, putting the emphasis on living after faith. This is the official podcast of recoveringfromreligion.org. Now with today's program on Living After Faith, here's Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Jerry DeWitt, the first graduate from the Clergy Project and the director of Recovering from Religion. Come laugh with me.
Darrel Ray is joining us today. You know him. He's the author of Sex and God. He's the author of The God Virus. Totally set him on fire at the American Atheist Convention in Washington, D.C. with his discussion about sex. But today we've got something else, something you may not know about Dr. Darrel Ray. That doctor actually stands for something.
He's started up the Therapist Project, and it's kind of an outreach or an outgrowth of Recovering from Religion, which Darrel also founded, which is really awesome. We are the official podcast of recoveringfromreligion.org, by the way. So this Therapist Project, tell us what this is.
Well, Rich and Deanna, it goes back 3 years when I published The God Virus. I was shocked. Within weeks after the book came out, I was getting emails and phone calls from people saying, "I wish I'd have had this book when I was getting out of religion. And oh, by the way, I need a good therapist, or I still need a good therapist, or my wife needs a good therapist, or my children. And can you help me find one?" Because they saw that I'm a psychologist in the book. I couldn't answer their question. I don't know a psychologist in Houston, Texas, or in Miami, Florida. So I couldn't help them. I could just say, well, here's the things to look for if you're looking for a psychologist. And they would say, well, I did that. But I went to those psychologists, and there's a religious person, or they're spiritual, or they're New Age, or they tried to get me to go back to church. And I'm thinking, crap, Even the best hints I could give people oftentimes led them right into somebody that had woo-woo kind of psychology approaches.
And that can be so dangerous because, I don't tell all of my story all the time because you can't leave, every detail. But one that I don't tell is I had 2 bad therapists before I got the one that I have now. And those were some of the worst months of my life. Because when your therapist is trying to push you back towards religion, the thing that tore you up, and they don't even get it, one of them said, well, just read a mainstream commentary and accept that as your new truth. I'm like, yeah, I have read Matthew Henry, Matthew Poole, go down the list, Adam Clark, I've read all of this crap. I have read the preacher's homiletic commentary, the pulpit commentary, the Baker's Biblical Illustrator. You just go down the whole list of all of this stuff. And which one is truth? None of it's truth. So trying to work with someone who essentially is a Christian counselor is not going to work for somebody who is no longer Christian, and especially trying to recover.
Right. And so what we're trying to do, after almost 3 years of dealing with these questions, I finally decided last year to start to try and find a way to find secular therapists, a systematic approach. And I did a big leadership workshop with Han Hills in Wilmington, North Carolina in October. Met this fellow, Han Hills, and he's an amazing person. He's running a major free thought group in North Carolina. He brought this huge leadership conference together and with over 60 leaders from all over the Carolinas. And I just saw how good he was at organization. Then I found out he's a web developer and he knows all sorts of things about how to do web design. And I told him I need a way to help find therapists. And here's my idea. And I told him about my idea for a website where secular therapists could register. And he jumped on that like fleas on a dog, and he spent hundreds of hours coding and getting this thing ready for us to go live, and we just went live this week. But the theory behind, or the principle behind this, is that therapists in many communities, a therapist cannot come out as an atheist or a secularist or a humanist because they get so many referrals from churches, from religious organizations, from Catholic charities, from places like that. If they came out as as an atheist or a secularist, they'd lose half their clients or more. They might lose their entire practice.
And in some parts of the country, you're going to be picketed. You're going to have people, and you say, no, oh, yes, you don't know my part of the country where I came from. Yes, it would happen.
Yeah, well, I live 45 miles from Fred Phelps, so I know what picketing's about, and they might picket us. I don't know, picket a therapist. So it's very difficult to find a secular therapist because they can't advertise. So what we're trying to do is create a website. It's kind of like Match.com or eHarmony or someplace like that, dating site, where nobody knows anybody else's email or phone number, and may not even know where you live or where your office is. And you can just put a therapist would register with us, and that's what we're trying to do right now, is trying to get therapists to register on our website. And then once we get enough therapists registered, then a client can go in, or a prospective client can go in and just put their zip code in. And it'll say, we have 3 therapists within 100 miles of your home, or within 50 miles of your home, just like a dating site will give you that. And then you can contact that therapist through our service and correspond with them until you're satisfied. And the therapist can correspond with you until they're satisfied. It goes 2 ways. The therapist, you may not want to drive 100 miles, or the therapist may not want to see you because it's not their specialty. I don't know. But anyway, both sides are kept anonymous until they decide to reveal themselves. And nobody has to advertise openly about who they are, or whether they're secular or atheist or anything like that.
The idea is so necessary, and I'm so glad that you and Han took this on. One of the things that, somebody religionists might say is that if there are counselors out there who are secularists and they don't let their Christian clients know, isn't that sneaky?
When people go to therapists, if they want to go to a Christian therapist, they look up Christian Counseling Center and go to one.
Yeah, that's an important thing to say. Is when I was a pastor, a lot of times we had Christian directories in our city that Christian businesses would sign up for, and all the Christian counselors would be signed up for it, and all the but you can't do that if you're an atheist, because again, that backlash.
Right. And quite frankly, a therapist, period, should be secular. A Christian counselor, that's an oxymoron, period. If you're a Christian counselor, then you have a specific worldview that you are bound as a Christian to impose upon your clients. So you're going to come in, and when Christian counselors tell me, well, I don't impose my religious values on my clients, maybe they're true 10%, but the other 90% can't do that. It's very difficult to take a profoundly deep religious faith and belief and divorce it from your relationship with the client. And it's going to seep out. And if I was an atheist going into a Christian therapist, would I really get served as well? I just don't think you do.
The number one question we get at Living After Faith is, how do I find a therapist? Because so many of them have done exactly what I did, exactly what you're talking about. You go try a therapist, you find out that after a long time, in my case, I was with one therapist 6 months, seeing him every week and just getting worse. Before I discovered his whole purpose was to get me saved again. Well, that was going to kill me. I would have jumped off a bridge before I could have reached the place that I could believe in God again.
And I've heard from email from someone, they told me that they were seeing a counselor. They had a therapist of some kind, and they had not told them how they feel about religion. They were hiding their non-belief from their therapist because they weren't sure what that therapist was going to do and how they were going to react.
Deanna, I get that all the time. I get people email me, say, I've been to a therapist, but I'm afraid to tell them I'm an atheist because they have a crucifix in their office.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
Or I'm afraid to tell them I'm an atheist because I live in such a religious community, and I don't know how they'll respond to me. And I know they go to such and such a church, or their husband goes to such and or wife goes to such and such a church. So it's especially in small community, it's sometimes very difficult.
It's very easy for me to see why the clients need this service. The clients are out here saying, we've got to have therapists. And that's something we talk about quite a bit. Get a therapist. And, didn't anticipate the issue of, how? But what about from the therapist perspective, what is the benefit to them to participate in this?
Well, right now, a secular therapist is sitting in their community, and there are clients out there that need them and can't find them. So number one, there's a whole client base they're not serving. And those clients are going to Christian therapists, or they're going to woo-woo New Age therapists. They're going to people who cannot help them. And as you've noticed and noted, Rich, they may actually cause more harm because they are trying to impose a worldview on that person, a Christian worldview oftentimes. So I think the fact that there's an underserved and poorly served community setting right in your own zip code probably. I mean, if you're in business as a therapist, you want to reach out, you want to find more clients. And if you're a good therapist, those clients want to find you as well.
And especially you're talking about a client therapist match here. It's not just a client, but it's a client that you specifically can serve better than others in your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If those Christians want to go to Christian counselors, let them. I don't care. What I care about is I want atheists and secularists and humanists to find counselors that can help them without any superstition. If you look in, I wrote a blog today, a guest blog for J.T. Eberhart, so your listeners might want to go and look at that.
freethoughtblogs.com/WWJTD, short for What Would JT Do?
And we'll put a link to that.
Yeah. And the basic thing I said in there is I want to help non-superstitious clients find non-superstitious therapists. Anybody who is Christian, anybody who's New Age, anybody who believes in chi or energy is just flat superstitious. Superstition has no place in psychotherapy. Yet, we see right now organizations like Liberty University giving master's degrees, licensed qualified master's degrees in marriage and family counseling. Now, those people have got one goal in mind, and that is to impose Jerry Falwell mental health on everybody. And that's dangerous. But people can't just look and say, well, he's got a license in the state of Virginia, or he's got a license in the state of California. He must qualify. Well, yeah, he qualifies as the lowest common denominator, and he qualifies as a licensed therapist under the Jerry Falwell regime, but he's not qualified to actually, I don't see how that person can help people in a marriage and family, because they're going to come in with an idea that Jesus can help you in your marriage. And Jesus destroys marriages. As I write about in my book, Sex and God, I prove it. I really show how religion destroys marriages and why divorce rate is highest among religionists in the United States. And the more religious you are, the higher the divorce rate is. So marriage and family counselors out of the Baptist church aren't doing a very good job in many cases. That doesn't answer Rich's question, but I have 5 reasons why therapists should register on our site. The first one was it's a poorly served community, as I already said. But the second one is a practical one. Atheists are often better educated than the general population. So they can respond to more sophisticated therapeutic methods. And as a therapist, you love to get good clients. They're easy to work with. The third practical reason, or third reason is a practical reason, and that is atheists, they generally have a higher IQ. I mean, all the research shows that atheists have about an IQ of about 5 points higher than the general population. Now, Christian and religionists hate to hear this, but that's what the data shows us. So that kind of a person is being more intelligent, oftentimes is easier to work with in therapy. And the fourth reason is a selfish reason. Atheists often have good jobs. They're teachers, they're scientists, they're engineers, and so they probably have insurance. And the fifth selfish reason is they're more affluent than the average population. So they pay their bills and they can afford therapy even if they don't have insurance or insurance doesn't cover it all. So, I mean, there's some real selfish reasons, and I don't see anything wrong with selfish reasons, for trying to serve this community.
I think those are good reasons because you've got to get to a place where you get enough therapists lined up so that the client base can be served. Because, to really make it work, you're going to need therapists in every community, because I firmly believe there are people in every community who are leaving religion, who are suffering from direct results, or simply people who have been secular all their lives, and yet just because you've been secular all your life doesn't mean you don't need a therapist from time to time.
I want your listeners to help us, and that's why we're talking here today. We need therapists to register with this service. And we know that we can't reach all the therapists, but if your listener has ever been a client of a good therapist, we want to know about that. Tell them to get a hold of their therapist and tell them about this project. Good secular therapists are not necessarily connected to the atheist or secular community.
Yep.
And they may not be listening to this podcast, but your listener is listening to this podcast. And they can email or give a phone call to that therapist and say, I really thought you helped me a lot. You're a good therapist. You're secular. You helped me without imposing religious values. Check out this website and register if you think you qualify.
That's fantastic. And, word of mouth is such a powerful way people recommend services to each other that, I think just having, people who have used therapists that are good. And then maybe we'll ask them like, hey, I know somebody who saw a therapist and they thought they were talented and secular and evidence-based. And, then they will tell other people about the Therapist Project. And soon enough, we'll end up with lots and lots of great people to choose from.
Right.
Another way that people can, another thing you can do to suggest someone, if your free thought group or secular group does have some therapists who attend and do show up at some of the functions, mention it to them as well.
I think just mention it to any free thought group. Make it a 5-minute discussion at your next meeting, because not everybody's going to listen to this podcast, but somebody in that group is. And then those people know people, and those people know other people. And before you know it, somebody knows a good therapist that has not heard this podcast or hasn't heard about the Therapist Project. The process of registering. When you register, we then have 2 qualified therapists who are well-known secular therapists. Will look at the registration, at the application, if you will, and we'll make a decision whether the person gets included in the registry or not. Now, obviously, most people are going to get included, but we want evidence that the person is secular or is capable of behaving in a secular way in therapy. So that means that we're not upfront excluding people who may be religious or may have a spiritual bent. We're not excluding those people up front, but we are being very careful, and we want to make sure that the people who make the therapist list are capable of working well with therapists, with clients that are secular.
So it's okay for them to be a believer of some kind as long as they are highly committed to using evidence-based methods and secularism in their practice.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
They may go to a Unitarian church. They may be a Quaker. They may be a liberal Presbyterian. I know those people probably are more capable of serving without imposing their secular values. But if we see any evidence that somebody is New Age, if they're a channel, if they believe in spiritual, and I'm serious, we have already had people apply or be suggested that right on their website it says they are a channel.
Oh my gosh.
There's woo-woo there already, and that's the kind of person we are not looking for. And so I just don't want people to get there to go there and apply and get rejected. Frankly, we want to let people know what our criteria are up front. And our criteria is no New Age stuff, no woo-woo stuff, no major spirituality stuff or religious stuff. And you have to be very committed to using secular methods, evidence-based methods with our clientele. We are just a matchmaker service like Match.com or eHarmony. That's all we're trying to do is match the therapist with the client. We take no responsibility for the qualifications of the therapist, and no responsibility for what's going on the client side either. So I mean, we cannot be liable. That's just bottom line. We cannot be liable for what happens in the therapeutic relationship or in the way people get connected.
And it looks like you've got some pretty decent precautions in effect, ways that both the therapist can screen their clients and the clients can screen the therapist. I'm sure that helps to eliminate any potential problems, at least a little better than not. And I think that's great because it allows people that, maybe the client has certain expectations or criteria, and so does the therapist. And, it's not like the website can list every single thing about each person. So the communication in the anonymous mode allows them to be honest about, their beliefs, where they live, what's going on, what they're looking for, what kind of therapy, that kind of stuff. So they can kind of give each other a little once over without having to worry about, it getting out.
Well, and I don't think it's foolproof. I mean, if somebody really wanted to find a way around us, they might be able to do that. We don't claim that we've got a perfect system here. We've got a system that's better than the current way of finding secular therapists. That's what we claim. If somebody searches our database, let's say in a month or two, we get a therapist and they start searching and they can't find somebody in the area, we have a number of therapists that are happy to do distance therapy on the phone or, that in some distance manner. So, so don't give up. I don't want people to get online and find that there's nobody in their area, because the default may end up being, for somebody in Timbuktu, Alabama, it may be the only way to really get a good secular therapist is by phone.
And that's effective therapy. It does work.
It does, yeah. I've done phone therapy off and on for a couple decades in my practice. So
I bet it's a little more comfortable for a client too, that they don't have to get out of the house and go somewhere and have the stress of, finding parking or commuting or whatever. They can just kick back in their jammies and, open up and have a mellow experience and get the same help as if they had left the house.
Absolutely. In fact, in my practice, I oftentimes found like I got better information in some ways over the phone than I got face to face. There's something, I think people reveal things when they don't have we're not worried about your facial or nonverbal responses.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think sometimes face-to-face therapy has got its advantages too. I'm not going to say one's totally better than the other. There's definitely times I think it would have been better had I had the person in my office. I think we've covered it great, guys. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, no, we're so glad that you're doing this. I mean, I just want to just bow down and kiss your feet. Thank you.
And Darrel's saying, it's not my feet I want you to kiss.
Rich,
well, duh.
You know that.
I'm Rich Lyons.
I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
Come laugh with me.
You've been listening to the Living After Faith podcast, the official podcast of recoveringfromreligion.org. The music in this episode is Rosecross by Morrison's Prophecy. You can follow on Twitter at LAF with me, like Living After Faith on Facebook, or go to livingafterfaith.com. Thank you for listening to Living After Faith.